coming up. The founder of Kakao Corporation was grilled in Parliament over the recent blackout of services. He apologized and vowed to consider all possible measures to compensate those affected. The White House National Security Council spokesperson expresses concerns over North Korea's recent provocations while highlighting the possibility of a potential nuclear test. Plus, Rishi Sunak is confirmed as the UK's next Prime Minister. The former finance minister will be the country's first non-white Prime Minister once he steps into his office. Good morning. Welcome to New Day at Arirang. The founder of Kakao was in the hot seat at the National Assembly over the recent blackout of services yesterday. As it affected many businesses, he vowed to consider all possible measures to compensate them properly. Lee Kyung-eun leads us off this morning.
The founder and former chairman of Kakao Corporation, Kim Beom-su, bowed his head, apologizing for what's been called a digital blackout caused by the tech giant's inability to swiftly restore its services following a fire at a data center 9 days ago.
I sincerely apologize for causing you inconvenience in using our services.
To business users, the disruptions meant more than just inconvenience, but financial losses. Especially for taxi drivers and local shops, they rely on the platform to reach their customers. Kakao is currently compensating the affected businesses based on the terms of the contract, like extending paid memberships or returning a certain period of the subscription fee in cash. But lawmakers call for more than what's written in the terms.
Would you also consider giving small business owners a fixed amount of universal compensation too?
I will consider all possible measures and do my utmost to help the affected businesses.
But the question is how to compensate those who use free services, namely the messaging app Kakao Talk and Tom Email, like freelancers, the self-employed, and local shops, which use these platforms to receive proposals and reservations.
So far, there are no cases for us to refer to in other countries where compensation has been paid for free services. But we are taking damage reports and will come up with a compensation scheme.
Regarding Kim's rather lukewarm stance, lawmakers call for bold action.
Kakao was able to grow in the beginning because of the people who came for the free services. I urge Kakao to take bold action to compensate them.
The CEO of SKCNC, which manages the data center where the fire broke out, vowed his company's cooperation in paying compensation too. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
Washington has expressed concerns over North Korea's latest provocations, suggesting a nuclear test could be imminent. Speaking during a press briefing on Monday, White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby explained that the North could conduct a nuclear test at any time. He added concerns had prompted the U.S. to add some intelligence capabilities off the Korean peninsula for better insight. He also reaffirmed the U.S. commitment to engage in dialogue with Pyongyang, saying that Washington has offered to sit down with the North without preconditions. The remarks come as U.S. State Department spokesperson Ned Price also explained that the U.S. remains open to dialogue with Pyongyang. Price said Washington is preparing for all contingencies in close coordination with partners and allies around the world. South Korea's first Vice Foreign Minister, Cho Hyun-dong, is visiting Tokyo on Tuesday to attend the 11th vice ministerial talks with counterparts from the U.S. and Japan. Cho will sit down for the trilateral meeting on Wednesday with Wendy Sherman and Takeo Mori. They're expected to discuss ways to strengthen cooperation in response to recent provocations from North Korea. The three countries have recently ramped up efforts to restore cooperation on security and sanctions against Pyongyang. A senior U.S. official also said escalating tensions between China and Taiwan will also be on the agenda. Meanwhile, South Korea and Japan will hold separate talks on resolving the issue of compensation for Korean victims of wartime forced labor. Seoul plans to develop ties further with Beijing, where Xi Jinping enters his third term in office. How will the Chinese leaders' continued rule affect the bilateral relations? Kim Da-mi provides a deeper analysis.
Seoul will continue to pursue healthier and more mature South Korea-China relations under Xi Jinping's third leadership term based on the spirit of mutual respect and reciprocity. This is according to a senior official from South Korea's foreign ministry on Monday in response to Xi's re-election over the weekend. They added Seoul is also considering sending an official congratulatory message to Beijing, as the South Korean government had done in 2012 and 2017. With a firmer grip on China, Xi has picked a top governing body packed with his loyalists, meaning the latest leadership reshuffle is likely to put a greater weight on relations with Washington. The growing U.S.-China rivalry in various fields such as technology may sandwich South Korea between the two, especially following efforts from the Biden administration to keep China in check. The Taiwan issue can also be a challenging variable for Seoul-Beijing ties if tensions escalate in the region.
South Korea's diplomatic position has narrowed and is one step closer to the U.S. That doesn't mean the Yoon administration has given up on ties with China, but it's a time when more wisdom is needed in making foreign policy towards China.
Despite such global challenges, South Korea and China are on the same page when it comes to maintaining peace on the Korean peninsula. Experts say Seoul can secure a diplomatic space with Beijing, especially ahead of mounting fears that North Korea is on the verge of conducting a nuclear test. They added the two countries could lay the foundation for positive ties if the leaders manage to hold their first in-person talks on the sidelines of the G20 Indonesia next month. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
Following months of political fever in Britain, Rishi Sunak is set to become the country's next prime minister, succeeding Liz Truss, who resigned last week. Sunak, who takes the reins following a tumultuous 6 weeks of Truss leadership, vowed unity and stability amid profound economic challenges. Kim Beom-su has more.
Rishi Sunak will be named Britain's new prime minister after winning the Conservative Party's leadership contest on Monday. The decision follows a fast-tracked party leadership race to fill the void left by Liz Truss. And it also followed the withdrawal of former Prime Minister Boris Johnson from the race on Sunday. In his first public remarks, Sunak paid tribute to the dignity and grace of the outgoing prime minister. He then warned that the country faces, quote, a profound economic challenge, which now calls for unity.
We now need stability and unity, and I will make it my utmost priority to bring our party and our country together, because that is the only way we will overcome the challenges we face and build a better, more prosperous future for our children and our grandchildren.
42-year-old Sunak formerly held the position of Chancellor of the Exchequer under Boris Johnson's administration and becomes the first British Asian to serve in Britain's highest office. He is a center-right moderate who vows to pave a prudent path to balance the country's books and address its sky-high debt. Sunak will be appointed Britain's third prime minister this year on Tuesday after outgoing Prime Minister Truss submits her resignation to King Charles. Kim Beom-su, Arirang News.
Now over in Ukraine, Russian missile attacks destroyed apartment blocks in the southern part of Ukraine. No fatalities, but many were injured by the explosions at night. While continuing such acts, Moscow accused Kyiv of planning to detonate a radioactive dirty bomb. Ji-young has the latest.
In the southern Ukrainian port city Mykolaiv, residential buildings were destroyed by what residents said were very loud blasts. Although there were no deaths reported, the city's mayor said Sunday on the Telegram messaging app that Russian missile attacks wiped out the top floor of a residential building.
I was sleeping right here when I heard a loud explosion. After the first blast, I tried to get out, but the door was stuck. After a minute or two, there was a second loud blast. Our door was blown into the corridor.
The Russian attack using S-300 missiles caused injuries as debris was propelled across the plaza and into neighboring buildings.
This is the annihilation of the Ukrainian people, and Russia must be held accountable for this, a criminal case for the crimes they're committing.
Meanwhile, Russia has accused Ukraine of planning to detonate a radioactive dirty bomb. Moscow's defense minister Sergei Shoigu told his U.S., British, French, and Turkish counterparts over the phone that Ukraine could escalate the conflict and then accuse Moscow of using weapons of mass destruction. However, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said only Russia is capable of using nuclear weapons in Europe.
If Russia calls and says that Ukraine is allegedly preparing something, it means only one thing. Russia has already prepared all this. I believe that now the world should react as harshly as possible.
He also asked for more support from the West amid Russia's nuclear threats. The White House said that Shoigu's claim is, quote, transparently false, and it was also rejected by the Pentagon. Ji-young, Arirang News.
Consumers in South Korea are apparently expecting high inflation to continue in the months to come. Expectations for inflation among consumers rose in October for the first time in 3 months. The Bank of Korea's survey of roughly 2,500 households released on Tuesday said expected inflation for the next 12 months edged up from September by 0.1 percentage point to 4.3%. The bank said the rise was due to higher electricity and gas bills in Korea, as well as rate hikes in major economies. Consumer sentiment fell slightly as well. The composite consumer sentiment index for October came to around 88.8, down 2.6 points on month. It's well below 100, meaning more people are pessimistic than optimistic about the economy. October 25th, Dokdo Day in South Korea. Dokdo is an island in the East Sea and South Korea's easternmost island. To this day, Japan has claimed ownership of the island, but there are South Korean soldiers stationed on the island, and it's only accessible from South Korea. Recently, the dispute over this island has been overshadowed by other issues between Seoul and Tokyo, like wartime forced labor victims' compensation. So, to commemorate this day, we're connecting with Doug Bando, a senior fellow at the Cato Institute. Good evening to you as you're in Virginia.
Hello there.
So, Japan's continued claims over the island have been overshadowed recently, as I've said. Other sensitive issues between the two countries have taken the spotlight. Is this matter still relevant to bilateral relations for the two countries?
Yes, the island dispute is kind of a constant irritant. It is not as important at the moment as the court cases and some of the other issues, but it remains an issue that comes up again and again and causes problems between the two countries.
Right, and last month, and we know that the core, essential fundamentals of this dispute is whether the Sea of Japan or East Sea is the discussion. And last month, when U.S. military released info about the trilateral naval exercise, it labeled the East Sea as waters east of Korean Peninsula instead of the Sea of Japan. This was the first time the maritime region was labeled this way by the military. What was the thinking behind the U.S. military decision to refrain from calling it the Sea of Japan?
Well, it's a very unusual way to refer to that body of water. I suspect it was an attempt by the Pentagon not to get in the middle of the dispute between Japan and South Korea. The Biden administration would love to see these two countries get closer to one another and probably doesn't want to get in the middle of a name dispute.
Right. So just adding on to that, so as you said, the Biden administration doesn't want to get into the middle of this dispute. How has his stance been so far, would you say?
Well, Washington doesn't take a position on any of the historical issues. What it does argue is that South Korea and Japan have so much in common and share an interest in dealing with both North Korea and China, that there is an overriding interest for Seoul and Tokyo to find an accommodation. So Washington is going to be pushing that and using its influence as it can to try to move both countries forward. From an American standpoint, the security of the region is the most important issue for all of the countries involved.
Right, and this territorial dispute seems to be one without a foreseeable resolution, unlike the wartime forced labor victims who are seeking compensation and are at a late stage in their lives. Will this dispute ever come to an end, and how do you see it eventually being resolved, considering other territorial disputes that you've seen so far?
Well, the territorial dispute at the moment isn't pressing, as you indicated, that there's no forcing event. Conceivably, the two countries could, come to some accommodation in terms of resource development if that was relevant. I think what's most important is solving the legal cases, because those do have a forcing event. If those were solved, it would be easier for both Japan and the Republic of Korea to be able, I think, to set aside an issue like the island dispute. But with other unresolved issues, they build on one another and each reinforce the other.
Right, and I want to get into one more thing. Like you said, they build onto one another. Do you think that the territorial dispute will only get even bigger as other issues are taking the spotlight?
I think the territorial dispute is kind of an add-on, which is it's a convenient one to use. Japan complained, I think it was August, because there was an ROK ship doing maritime mapping. So it constantly comes up. Nevertheless, it's not as important in practical terms as commercial relations, trade restrictions, intelligence cooperation. All of these others have been imperiled, because of these historical disputes. So those really are more important.
Right, and there's just way too many things for us to talk about in a short term between South Korea and Japan. Well, thank you so much again for joining us this morning and afternoon for you, and hope to speak to you again soon.
You're welcome. Take care now.
Now, for a look at the news from around the world, we turn to our Matthew Ashley, as usual, who's standing by at the Arirang newsroom. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Doyon.
Now, I want to start in Myanmar, where a concert held by an ethnic minority insurgency group was bombed in an air raid.
Well, that's right, Doyon. At least 60 people have been killed and around 100 wounded in the air raid on Kansi village on Sunday evening local time. Now, famous local singers, civilians and military officers are among the dead. Witnesses say 3 bombs were dropped by 3 separate aircraft on the concert, and that medics were blocked by Myanmar's military from moving the injured to a nearby hospital. The concert was organized by the Kachin Independence Army on the 62nd anniversary of the founding of their political arm. Now, the Kachin Independence Army have been in conflict with Myanmar's Tatmadaw armed forces since 1961. Only one ceasefire was ever brokered, which broke down in 2011. Myanmar's ruling junta has not yet commented on the incident. Now, a prominent Pakistani journalist has been shot dead in Kenya. 49-year-old Arshad Sharif was killed by local police gunfire on Sunday local time. The police say he was fatally shot while sitting in the passenger seat of a car that failed to stop at a roadblock on the Nairobi-Magadi highway. They added that the shots were fired due to, quote, mistaken identity. The outspoken reporter fled Pakistan in August over a number of cases filed against him for criticizing the military. It's not known what he was doing in Kenya. Kenyan police say the investigation into his death is still underway. The incident also sparked a street protest by Pakistani journalists in Karachi on Monday. Now, 2 Chinese nationals have been charged with spying in the U.S. The Justice Department on Monday said the pair attempted to bribe a U.S. official to obtain insider information on a criminal case involving Chinese telecommunications company Huawei. The official, however, was a double agent for the FBI. Meanwhile, 7 Chinese nationals were charged with attempting a forced repatriation of a naturalized citizen, and 4 others were charged with trying to recruit U.S. officials using a fake think tank. The cases by the department mark a crackdown on Chinese espionage activities in the country. And finally, Hindus around the world celebrated Diwali on Monday. The holiday celebrates the return of the Hindu god Lord Rama, a tale of Hindu mythology where light triumphs over dark and is symbolized by people lighting candles or oil lamps. The day, which can fall in either October or November, also marks the start of the Hindu New Year and sees people gather for feasts and prayers. People also set off firecrackers to mark Diwali, but this year several Indian states have banned the sale of firecrackers over concerns about air pollution.
Good morning. We could feel that colder air once we stepped outside this morning. Low temperatures are a couple of degrees lower than the same time yesterday in most parts of the country. Jiangsu in Jeollabuk-do province is seeing sub-zero readings with frost and ice this morning. Now, the brief cold spell will ease tomorrow afternoon with highs going to near seasonal norms, but big gaps in readings of more than 10 degrees Celsius between lows and highs will continue, so please dress accordingly so as not to catch a cold. In fact, cold and flu activity levels are high to very high in most parts. If you remember, east of Gangwon province saw the season's first snow advisory yesterday. Well, snow has stopped, but light rain will continue through the first half of the day. And afternoon highs will be 1 to 2 degrees higher than Monday. Southern Daejeon topping out at 17 degrees Celsius this afternoon. And plenty of clear skies with good air quality will be a feature nationwide all day today. Mostly dry and sunny conditions are expected to persist throughout the week. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
And that wraps up today's New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for our Wednesday's edition at the same time. Please stay with Arirang News, though, for more updates throughout the day. Have a lovely day or evening wherever you are, and take care.